to the JL Jeep Wrangler review. We're going to talk about the Sahara, the Rubicon, on and off-road performance, all the technical stuff, and whether you're crawling to the mall, terrorizing an off-road park, flexing in a high school parking lot, or if you're somebody that likes to connect with nature, you're going to find something here that will tickle your bottom. So get ready. One thing you can say about the Jeep Wrangler is it's an iconic shape. It's immediately recognizable. It's a brand within a brand. And the designers knew they wanted to keep it this way. And anybody that was on the design team that even brought up unibody design, CUV, independent rear suspension was buried in the back of a Dodge Aries. So all of this boxiness has a lot of trade-offs, but one of their design goals was to improve aerodynamics, improve fuel economy, and they've done that here with the body structure. When you look from the top down, there's more of a teardrop shape. The windshield was redesigned and sloped. The front grille is on an angle to improve airflow and overall smoothness to reduce drag. The underbody was changed, and it may not look like it, and it may not really represent so much in the fuel economy numbers, but it does make a huge difference. And again, it's a lot of the little details here that add up to a lot. Now, there's some differences between the Sahara and the Rubicon, and it's really not that hard to tell because the Rubicon has a massive decal splattered along the side of it with some red accents. You also get rock rails to protect the underbody of the Rubicon, where the Sahara gets these nice little running boards to help you get in, which is great if you're short or you're more mature in age, or you just don't like having to use a mountain goat to get on the inside. And I think over time you get used to the grab handles, grabbing onto the roof to get in. It's pretty utilitarian that way. Now with the Wrangler, you get a couple different top options. One, the soft top like this, or the hard top, and they have fancy marketing names like the Freedom Top. The hard top allows you to have removable panels, so you can get the roof off, or this, you release two latches, and you push it back, and it's on hydraulics, and it will pop up in the air, and you have to manually push it down the rest of the way, and it really is like a convertible. It's great. Now, of course, this also supplements my workout routine. I start to do some curls for the girls depending on my location. In the back, this is where it gets a little bit more finicky if you have the soft top. When you open up this tailgate, oh, how am I gonna get things in here? Well, I thought that to myself when it was raining, and I realized, well, this is the trade-off of this. Because this does not just lift up. You have to physically remove this whole panel. And then I thought, well, how the hell do I get this off? And then I realized you have to absolutely gorilla this thing off. And because it was new when I got it, I mean, it was so difficult to pull this off, these tabs, to release this bar, to pull off the top section. And then after a few times, and namely after it warmed up, when this thing relaxed and stretched out, it's so much easier to get it off because of the rail system and to put it back on. So if you're struggling with this, you know, try to get it on and off in the heat a couple times and just do it, and eventually it will go on and off much easier than it does when it's new. But I feel like this is such a cool design to get in here and utilize this to have the open air experience. But let's be real, things are easy to fly out of here. You're gonna have to tie them down more if you're stacking things up. It's just something to be aware of. All right, let's get up here, use these fancy handles. Now my 30-year-old son said, "Dad, can we get a Miata?" I said, "No, we're gonna get a Sahara. It's a convertible, it's the same thing." He's like, "No, it's not." And I'm gonna tell you why it is in many ways, because you have so many of the same elements on the interior that you would on a sports car convertible. There's this classic simplicity that they were trying to design in the overall dash size, the geometry, the shape. There's still plenty of physical knobs and buttons here to use your core functions. On the Rubicon, there is a quick switch for your lockers, your sway bar disconnect. All the window switches are in the center here, so you can remove the doors. I mean, this is, I don't know of any other vehicle that's even close to this price that gives you the flexibility of the Wrangler to be connected with your environment. And that's the same thing that you want in like a sports car experience. Yes, in those cars, it's about cutting up corners and going fast, but one of the key things is you want to be connected to the machine and to the road, and that's really what you feel in the Wrangler. They do a really good job with that. Now, yeah, is there some cheapness? Definitely. You can feel that with the modularity that they built into this for aftermarket parts for like handles, braces, nets, all the type of stuff that you want to put in here, you can tell that it was thought out for that type of stuff. So you get more buzzes, you get rattles. You know, when I'm driving down the road with the soft top, I can't even hear myself think sometimes. And I think, how the hell is that rattling so loud in the back? And that's one of the trade-offs of a vehicle like this. It's not trying to be this overly refined, distilled experience. And that's a huge con and a huge pro at the same time. And I think if you're a Wrangler person or a Jeep person, you're just gonna love that. And I'm not gonna yammer on about the interior all day. If you've seen one Jeep, you've seen them all. And like usual, the more money you spend, the more you get. Like a heated steering wheel, heated seats, leather surfaces everywhere, a bigger infotainment screen. And if you want to do that, you're going to be spending about $50,000 on the Sahara. Let's get more serious. Since we had access to the engineers and the designers of this, let's head into the shop and talk turkey. Oh boy, in the shop, Jack, with two Jeep products, 2019 Rubicon and Sahara on the Benpack lift. So, what do you think?
Well, we're the last outlet in probably the entire solar system to do a JL Wrangler video.
Yeah, no doubt.
Is your brain about melted with all the technical information?
Yeah. Truthfully, after doing some of these videos, my brain is maxed out because you have to become a mini expert on every single car. And when you're dealing with the engineering, like we talked to the chief engineer for the Wrangler line, there is so much that goes into this. I'm just going to let you take it over.
We've talked to every single rep at FCA at this point. We've talked to their parents at this point.
Yeah, we went to the nursing home and talked to their grandparents, their great-grandparents. So hopefully we can bring some more detail that you may have heard or may not have heard about the Wranglers.
So unfortunately for us, the Wrangler lineup is very complicated. The Sport and the Sport S get twin tube dampers. The Sahara gets a monotube damper. Then the Rubicon gets a monotube damper with a hydraulic bump stop.
Yeah, I can see that. It looks like just a poly bump stop, but then it leads to a hydraulic tube.
The whole point of the Rubicon was to increase basically off-road capability. So with that being said as well, the front end, the Rubicon gets a electronically disconnecting sway bar. So when you disconnect your sway bars, you're adding mechanical grip. It also allows for greater articulation of the front end.
Yeah, so if you're on like a rock and you're kind of up on the side on rocks, it allows you more wheel travel. And you can see the module in the front end that disconnects the sway bar.
Which is only on the Rubicon.
Okay.
You also get a smaller a smaller wheel diameter, but a greater tire diameter. It's giving you greater sidewall.
Does that help? Does that also increase the lift of the vehicle, the tires?
Yeah. The Rubicon is about, give or take, 0.7 to 0.8 of an inch taller in manufacturer specified ground clearance.
Okay. So in terms of the front differentials, or I'm sorry, the front axles, are they any larger in the Rubicon versus the other models?
The Rubicon gets Dana 44 axles, so they are a beefier axle. Because of the beefier axles in the Rubicon versus the Sahara and the different gear ratio specified in both the manual and the automatic, you get a more aggressive crawl ratio.
Okay.
Versus the Sahara and the Sport S.
So is the gearing different manual versus automatic on the Rubicon?
It is as well. So the crawl ratio as well on the automatic versus the manual Rubicon are different. However, the final drive ratio in a Rubicon is 410, whereas in the Sahara, I believe it's 345 with optional something else, okay. A slightly more aggressive option.
All right. So is there any other major differences in the front? What makes the Rubicon here more of an off-road capable truck than the Sahara or the lesser models?
Unfortunately, there are even more differences between the lesser models. So the Sahara also and the Rubicon get larger brakes, both rotors and calipers than the lesser model. It also gets more armor in the front end, and you get more water fording clearance between the larger tires and all the suspension changes. You can basically ford 30 inches of water in a Rubicon, where you can't do that in a Sport and a Sahara. So another big difference between the Rubicon, the Sahara, and the Sport S and the Sport are basically the front air dams. So in the Rubicon, you get a different bumper altogether. It's a little more rated for off-roading activity. So it has a larger approach and departure angle, so you can clear larger rocks, all other nonsense. But the con of that is your aerodynamics on this vehicle are far worse. And basically most of that has to do with the front air dam.
Interesting. Well, when you look at the underbody of this and the Sahara, it looks like it's from like 1794. I mean, it doesn't look like there was any thought put into aerodynamics at all. Everything's exposed, open, hanging out. But tell me more about, I mean, but they did put effort into this, right?
That was one of their biggest developmental goals of this vehicle. So, you know, their developmental goals in no particular order were increased drivability. So that means less NVH, better miles per gallon, you know, better on-road feel, while maintaining its ability and probably surpassing the ability of the prior generation, the JK Wrangler. So if you look at the CFD of basically the drag of the bottom half of the Wrangler, the JL Sahara and the Sport, it has a similar drag coefficient to a Cherokee or Grand Cherokee, like a regular CUV.
And I think that's one of the things, like we're joking around about like, taking a look at the underbody, and then you drive this and there's a massive difference in drivability on the road, specifically on the road compared to the previous generation. It's just a much better vehicle. And I think the one thing that you're gonna learn when you start to look at all these vehicles, you drive them, is it's not just one thing. And I've talked to engineers about this. It's not just about, oh, we're going to change the knuckle and we're going to put a panel here. One thing affects another. So if they make a change here, sometimes they have to make a change in the back, and all of these small things add up to bigger differences in the overall drivability.
On the Rubicon, you have the rock track. The rock track adds lockers and a more aggressive crawl ratio, as we talked about before. So you want to explain lockers to the boys and girls out there?
Yeah, it's really what, obviously if you're a truck person, it's a joke, but for the uninitiated, if you're in mud or snow or slippery conditions and you have, let's say, an open differential and you can't get traction, one wheel will turn, the other wheel won't. So when you lock the differentials together mechanically here, you're essentially spinning all the wheels at the same rate, going straight to try to get out of it. You're getting the most traction possible. So that's why the Rubicon only gets that. You can lock the back or both together, and then you can disconnect the sway bar. So that's really the main reason why you would choose the Rubicon, is all these optional things for off-roading or severe duty. You know, I mean, that's the big thing about this.
The lesser models, like the Sport and the Sahara, get the command track. The command track system is basically a all-wheel drive system you get on a truck. It does have open differentials, but the Sahara only gets a on-demand all-wheel drive system. So you can put it into 4 auto, and as soon as the vehicle detects slip, it'll send power to the front.
Yeah, and I think that's what most people are used to. Well, this is obviously more of a truck setup, but that's what you're typically seeing in your all-wheel drive systems and cars and trucks, where the system manages it all for you, will transfer power where it needs to get you out of a situation. And it's great for almost everything except, when you're going off-road to do real.
The Sahara is essentially the lifestyle vehicle. It's the mall crawler, it's the high school girl car, it's a luxury model, right? And because of that, that's why they added the on-demand system.
And it makes sense, because not everybody's going to want the hardcore Jeep, because most people are not going to off-road this. They're not going to go on trails and tour the country. So you're getting the more efficient all-wheel drive system for the street. For people that want the Jeep brand, they want the Wrangler brand, but you're getting a more usable all-wheel drive system for that.
So enough about the all-wheel drive systems. Let's get to the other part of the meat and potatoes of this, the transmission. So you have two separate transmission options. You have the all-new 8-speed automatic.
Which is very good.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually. And then you have this cable-operated manual. It's a 6-speed. There's nothing wrong with it.
The shifter doesn't feel very truckish. It definitely, it's a good balance between what you'd want from a truck, like that solid feeling, a little bit more engagement, and a typical car manual transmission.
Another important point to make is because they added the 8-speed automatic and they wanted to add more legroom for the passengers, the JL has a wider track width than the JK. Now, normally that's a bad thing in an all-wheel drive car. It means my turning radius is worse. It's wide. As is, this is a very wide vehicle. But because of their engineering know-how and geometry changes they've made, they've actually decreased the turning radius, which sure is great if you're trying to turn around a Wendy's parking lot or...
Right.
You know.
But if you're turning, as we found out, driving this off-road, it makes a big difference when you're in a tight situation. There's not a lot of clearance to the left or right. Doing a 3-point turn can be a pain in the ass. This is far better than it was in the JK, and you notice it instantly.
And you get the added legroom. I mean, the legroom still isn't great.
But it's better.
It is better.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's compromise, right?
Yeah, I mean, something that people don't understand and something that the manufacturers try to explain to people and they try to explain to us, the press, is that any car you make is compromised, right? They could have built a better off-roader. Mm-hmm. But if they built a better off-roader, it'd probably be worse on-road.
Right.
If it was better on-road and off-road, it would cost more money. As is, this is a $50,000 truck.
Right.
A company still needs to make money. People don't seem to understand that. And
well, and that's the point of kind of what we're getting at with some of these videos, namely the Wranglers, is you're trying to give people what they want and a foundation to modify it the way that they want. You start getting into stratospheric costs, which 50 grand is pushing it for most people. You get above that, it's out of the realm of affordability. As it is, you see most people commenting about this and the Gladiator. Well, they want a 20,000. Everybody wants something for nothing, and you just can't do it anymore and have a business making these things. It's too competitive of a market. There's too many products out there and not enough buyers for them. And that's what this is about. It's not about making a perfect vehicle. That's not what they're trying to do. They're not over-watering it down, keeping it at its core, listening to people, and still trying to keep it affordable. It's very, very difficult, much like it's difficult to make these videos not go on forever and ever and ever. All right, Jack, let's talk about some of the negatives. What do people complain about here?
not enough ground clearance. People always want more ground clearance.
Of course.
Because people want more ground clearance, they add more ground clearance, bigger tires and wheels, and that leads to something known as the death wobble.
Yeah, and the death wobble is something you hear a lot with the Jeeps. It's just, blown out of proportion. But it comes from the motorcycle world where you start to get the wobbles in the front and you can't control it and you're just done.
And you feel it in the steering wheel when this happens.
Yes. So a lot of the problems with the death wobble on the Wranglers has to do with mechanical changes that people make, because as we talked about, you change one thing, it affects the geometry of the other things, or increases the rigidity, so you have less motion. And all of these things are so carefully balanced from the factory that it can cause or exacerbate this issue if you modify it. Secondly, if you're off-roading it or you have wear in bushings, ball joints, tie rod ends, all the typical things that are in a suspension that wear, if you have a problem with a wheel alignment that's totally off, or a tire that's cupped and destroyed on one end or uneven, you can get a vibration that will accumulate and build on itself and create this wobble. So the thing is, make sure everything's in good condition. Check all of these things, make sure alignment's good, and if you're modifying things, be really careful about what you modify.
If you change one thing, you have to change something else.
Yes.
A lot of people don't understand that.
Right. It's all tied together.
The other complaint people have is this is not the safest vehicle. It does not have side curtain airbags. And the doors are effectively there for looks.
Your doors are removable, your roof is removable, and it's by design. They did this on purpose because that is what the Jeep is about. So you have to sacrifice certain things mechanically. And there's also something called liability. So as much as you want a safer vehicle, putting side curtain airbags
in a removable roof,
in removable doors is not possible. If you put it in a roof that you're removing, if the first time a customer damages it or drops it and the airbag doesn't work or blows up, you're going to get sued. So they've just left it out.
This vehicle isn't for everyone. If you want a vehicle made for everyone, you normally get something horribly compromised and terrible.
Yes, and that's why the Jeep is so special. It's not trying to be for everyone, and that's okay. That means it has its faults, clearly, and it has some things that you can't tolerate, which we've talked about in pretty great length, and it also gives it the personality. That's why people like Jeeps. It takes you places that other vehicles can't. It makes you feel a way that your mainstream appliances can't, and it's different. Jack, we're under the hood of the Wrangler. We have a 3.6 liter V6 with port injection only, mated to a 6-speed manual. This is the premier setup. It also has an 8-speed automatic, which is fine. But the big story, they have a 2-liter turbocharged direct injected motor that's new for the Wrangler.
And you can only pair that 4-pomper with an 8-speed automatic.
Yes, which
it's a good automatic.
No, it is. It's kind of a downer, but it's a good automatic. Now, the big thing with this is they've told us that they've spent an insane amount of time in terms of development and durability testing of the 4-cylinder. Because it's a turbo, it's jammed in here. I had a lot of questions about heat. So they've improved cooling with an enlarged radiator, but they also have an HTR and an LTR, a high temperature radiator and a low temperature to cool transmission, engine, the various coolers, and of course they've increased the radiator fan size. So they really spent a ton of time with that. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts, that it's definitely a motor that's over-engineered for the car.
They're
truck.
really trying to push it. And to be honest, I don't have a problem with it because it's a good motor. Under independent testing, so long story short, the manufacturer states that this V6 produces more horsepower, than the 4-popper, but less torque. But in reality,
when you factor in all the drivetrain losses, real-world driving, tires, blah, blah, blah.
The 4-popper, at least in a dyno, is shown to make both more horsepower and more torque, at least in 4th gear. It also feels faster more of the time.
And you know what, I really am not going to get that much into the engine and transmission performance of both cars in the drive, but I will say, driving both, the 4-cylinder, if you're going to take it new and you're not going to factor in longevity and all the other things.
Availability of parts.
Right, all of that stuff. If you drove them back to back, the 4-cylinder has such a big wow factor in terms of the off-the-line torque. It feels far more powerful than the V6 does. And a lot of it is because you're getting all the torque right at the start with the 4-popper. With the V6, you have to wind it out. Even then, you kind of feel like it's been detuned. That's what it feels like to me when you're winding it out. It feels like timing's being pulled to accommodate for heat and possibly fuel, whereas the 4-cylinder always feels powerful, except at the high revolutions.
Which most people in a Jeep don't wind their cars out to redline.
Right.
The only 2 changes they made on the V6 that are noteworthy is they've decreased the oil capacity and they added EES, the electric stop-start. But other than that, it's the same motor that's been here for at least 6 years at this point.
Okay. Well, let's get this thing on the road. We're going to start with the Rubicon driving impressions, and then we're going to get to the off-road impressions.
Sounds good.
All right, we are in the JL Wrangler Rubicon, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is a little bit different behind the wheel. The first thing is, this is the equivalent of a sports car for truck people, Jack. And the reason I say that is because the people that own like Miatas and S2000s, they love it for a lot of the same reasons Jeep people love the Wrangler. You can take the top off, it becomes a convertible. You have this connection to the road and the environment around you. And there is an emotional response you have from feeling this connection. Now, obviously, they're two different books, but you know, when you go to the track, obviously you're connected with the car here, but when you take this off-road, you're connected to the environment as well. They're so similar. but vastly different. And I found that to be one of the most interesting aspects of driving the Jeep Wrangler, Sahara or the Rubicon.
You make a lot of the same compromises you would in a sports car. Sure, you don't give up, I mean, in this case, you're giving up handling versus space and practicality. But I mean, neither vehicle is particularly comfortable on the road, to be honest, for long distances. I mean, this has a lot of the same wind noise problems and NVH problems you get in a sports car. And
both engine options are way, way better than they used to be.
The 3.6 in this, so if you want a manual trans, you're stuck. You have to get the 6-cylinder in this. And while it's not particularly special, there's nothing really negative to say about it. I mean, it makes its power up top. It sounds at least decent, particularly with an exhaust like this thing has. You know, there's a lot of drivetrain loss, but I can't say anything particularly horrible about it. Can you?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I think the thing is, you know, you're hauling around a lot of weight, and you just feel it in here. I mean, it's not horrendous, and obviously you're not going to buy a Jeep. You're not going to buy any Jeep for, like, explosive performance, and I think that's
a Trackhawk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean that type of Jeep, right? But a Wrangler, you know, people aren't buying this to be going insanely fast, and I think the trade-offs of losing a little bit of horsepower and torque, you have the good sound of the V6 and you get a manual trans, and there's just, like I always say, manual transmissions are dying, especially in the V6 realm, so it is a treat to kind of have this.
I think this 6-cylinder, if you're an enthusiast, you'd be happy with. But that being said, there's also a 4-cylinder option, which you've spent a decent amount of time with, and with the 4-popper, you can only get a 8-speed automatic.
And the 8-speed's good. I mean, like most FCA transmissions, their 8-speeds are programmed. They're so good that unless you're a hardcore enthusiast and you need a manual trans, you're not going to even care. And personally, in a Sahara or the 4-cylinder options, you'd almost want the automatic.
I mean, you have to get the automatic.
Yeah, I mean, you would want it anyway. Now, let's talk about the acceleration of the V6.
All right, hit it.
It's so weird. It's just, you know, the manual transmission feels pretty good. I'm surprised. The clutch take-up is very truckish. Like, I feel like I need to have work boots on with this because of the way that the pedal, I think it's really easy for people with bigger feet. There's plenty of room to do the clutch work.
I don't have a problem actually heel-toeing this thing.
I don't have a problem at all with it. It just doesn't feel like what you would expect from, like, a car manual trans.
But it is unfair to compare it to a car. I mean, a lot of people, I have the tendency constantly to compare SUVs or trucks to cars, but it's not one. I think that's something we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, so let's get into that. If you're coming from a CUV or an SUV, this Jeep or any truck is never going to feel like a car. It's just not possible with the way the front suspension's set up and the rear suspension set up. It's always going to have this truck feel, this command of the road. The ride is very unique, and even the steering feel. You have these big ass tires on. It affects your steering. It affects the way that the car responds, brakes. There's a lot of dive. There's a lot of pitch. There's a lot of roll.
And the Rubicon makes that even worse. You go from a 31-inch tire to a 33. So you have an even larger sidewall. So when you turn in, there's almost a delay.
Yes, there is a delay. This is not something that you're going to buy. Again, if you're coming from a typical CUV or an SUV, this is not something you're going to buy and expect any type of quick reflexes, because that's not what it's about. It is about the idea of having something that is dual purpose, that will handle any type of on-road conditions, snow, rain, sleet, gravel. It's going to handle basically any on-road surface with inclement weather, and then you can take specifically the Rubicon to pretty much all different types of off-road parks and still have the capability to have a lot of fun there.
There are some negatives. I've spent a lot more time in this particular vehicle than you have.
Let's get into that, actually. So what's the biggest negative of the Jeep, or at least the Rubicon, on the road?
Again, taking into effect it's a truck, not a car. I'm trying to be cognizant of that. At least in the V6 option, in the Rubicon, this is not my vehicle, but this is let's call it the executive intern's vehicle,
yeah.
Johnny America's. He's had this for a little over 5,000 miles, and in the wintertime months on the highway, he got 16 miles to the gallon, traveling between 70 and 80 miles an hour, which is at least in the Midwest where we are, the traditional kind of speeds you're doing. I don't know what you got on the 4-popper, and I'm sure you're about to tell me, but...
Yeah, the 4-popper, driving conservatively, I got anywhere from 22 to 24, and it's not been in freezing conditions. So you can expect that to probably go down into like low 20s. So there is a huge benefit to having the 4-cylinder.
The other negative of this vehicle, gas miles aside, is if you're doing a lot of highway driving, and I mean real highway driving, you know, I-35, I-30, you know, that's the Midwestern highways. If you're doing above 70 miles an hour, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, and I think that's what I noticed with the Sahara with the soft top is it doesn't matter if you have 2-mile-an-hour winds or 30, every day is a wind advisory with it. It gets blown around on the highway so much. Like you get above 65 miles an hour, it's just basically driving a wall around. It is so noisy. Even on phone calls, you get on a phone call, you can't hear anybody.
With a paper top.
Right. I mean, it literally is a paper top. But again, you're turning a truck into that convertible, and again, any car that is typically a convertible with a soft top has that issue. It's just amplified here because the aerodynamics are not that of a car. So
even with a hardtop, though, you have a lot of those same problems.
So you have to temper your expectations that to have all the good things, there are some bad things that come along with driving this on the road.
No lateral footroom in this car.
Right. You feel a little bit more trapped in the front. I agree with all the negative things that you said, and they're more amplified the more you do highway driving.
All right.
Final thoughts on the Jeep Wrangler. Over the course of this extremely long video, you've heard the pros, the cons, the technical information. But the takeaway is, it's not the best vehicle on the road. It's flawed. It has a ton of faults, and a lot of that is by design, because they were making this for the people that love the Jeep Wrangler. And people don't love the Jeep Wrangler because it has the best interior, the best ride quality, the best performance. They own it because usually it's an emotional purchase or something they have a big financial investment in once they start modifying it. And that's what makes it special and different. There are so many here today, gone tomorrow cars, like the EcoSports, the Compass, the Equinox, and you can name probably at least 30 other products that nobody's gonna remember in 20 years. And the Wrangler brand is gonna keep, as long as they keep making it, people are going to follow it because you feel something operating it. I had a chance to go to the River Road Rally Park, which I'm going to be doing all my off-road testing now in Mchenry. I had a chance to hang out with Johnny America and his Rubicon as we took the off-road course, where he better explained why he bought this. And I think that's all that needs to be said. You're looking for? Yeah, it's granite.
Hey, is this the way to the mall?
No. Can you tell me why you decided on a Rubicon, or a Jeep in general?
Well, kind of like you, I enjoyed driving vehicles. You know, if it wasn't going to be a Jeep, it was probably going to be like a Mustang or some sort of Charger, something that's kind of fun to drive. But I wanted a practical vehicle, and something that I recently have found to enjoy is off-roading. I'm an outdoorsy person. I like the adventure, I like going camping, I like hunting, fishing, stuff like that. So being able to have a vehicle that can take me places like that and going and seeing this scenery, and it's also practical. I would argue that a two-door Jeep might be a little bit better off-road, but it's not going to be as practical. So I decided to go with the four-door. I'd say that if you want to go and you want to go actually to an off-road park and you want to do something that is more than just like the easiest trails, I would say the Rubicon is a good idea. If you're going and taking your car off pavement and you're going to the beach, or you're going to go rock climbing and you want to go up the trails to get to where you want to rock climb, a stock Jeep or a Sahara Jeep is going to be good enough for you, because you're not going to be trying to boulder, and you're not going to be trying to climb rocks.
Sure.
But I mean, if you're really going to be doing extreme stuff, then a good starting point would be the Rubicon. It has electronic locking differentials, which I just used a bit ago. I mean, for me, you know, I'm going out into a national forest where there's nobody, and if that car does not start, I'm in trouble.
Yes.
So to have something where I know I can put my confidence in it is a lot more reassuring.
I'm on my laptop right now. This is the gentleman you're leaving me for? Very well. I hate the savage geese. I'm gonna show you how to get rid of them. Just like this.